Hello, everyone. It's Shane Conto, your Wasteland Reviewer, and welcome to the Wasteland, my weekly show where I take a deep dive into a particular film, and we're stuck in TV movie land for John Carpenter, second week of a TV movie, and we're going to be talking about Elvis, starring Kurt Russell. But Jim, thank you so much, as always, for coming on the show to chat some movies.
It's a pleasure, as always, Shane. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. And this time it's just the two of us instead of the movie club and we're going to be talking about a 2 hour and 40 minute made for TV movie about Elvis. But for those who haven't tuned into the show before, there's a couple segments. We have coming attractions and then our feature and then some recommendations. So this is a very interesting weekend that we're releasing this one on because generally it's Valentine's Day weekend, but it's also Super Bowl weekend, which usually Valentine's Day weekend's a good weekend for movies and Super Bowl weekend is a bad week for movies. So we're gonna have to see how that all shakes out. But Jim, what's the one that stuck out to you the most?
Of this week's coming attractions, I think Daughter stood out the most. As a child growing up homeschooled in a religious household, the cult thing always has a weird appeal for me. And I've also read, well, I'm living in Utah, and I've read Educated by Tara Westover, I believe was the author's name. And she was raised by kind of I think her father was bipolar. Her family was very, very religious. They were very secluded, and that book had a really profound impact on me. So, Daughter, of the movies available this week, I think is the one that I'd be most likely to see.
And what's interesting is I've seen most of the movies coming out this weekend already.
Of course, you have.
I've got a chance to breathe this weekend, but the one that and like I saw Daughter and it's definitely a worthwhile small time thriller. Very claustrophobic. But for me, I went with the mainstream one and which one I was hoping would be a lot of fun and then also interested to see what Steven Soderbergh does with it is Magic Mike's Last Dance. Because I didn't see XXL. I didn't really have much interest, especially since Steven Soderbergh did not direct that. Like the main reason I wanted to see Magic Mike, the original one, was because it was a Soderbergh film.
Mhm.
And now he's back. And one last dance for Mike, putting on a show. And it's very much a romance between Channing Tatum and Salma Hayek's character. And there sure is a lot of dancing. And it's really impressive technically. So Soderbergh does give that. Also, I'm not going to go into the story here, but I had one of the wildest press screening experiences going to see this. There is cookies shaped like men's abdomens and torsos. There was exotic dancers and all kinds of stuff. So they really went all out for Magic Mike's Last Dance, apparently.
But if I could jump in, it is Magic Mike, the last tease, is it not? So
Well,
this
well,
movie
no,
could potentially be a teaser for another movie, no?
no, this was that was the teaser like poster that they had. It's actually called Last Dance.
Oh, I see. I see. Okay.
Yeah, they had like a
I
giant
have still
sign.
not seen the original. I've heard it's really good. I've heard Magic Mike. Uh, the original was just called Magic Mike, correct? I've
Yep.
heard it was really good.
It's definitely a lot more than you thought it would be. And I think that might have disappointed some audience members going for a particular kind of movie. But here's the thing, you still got a lot of dancing and stripping. So like,
There are other theaters for that kind of thing, you know?
yeah. Well, what's funny is there's actually more female nudity in Magic Mike, the original, than there is male nudity.
Really? Oh, that's interesting. That'll be in film classes for years to come for that reason alone.
Yeah. There's a lot of women just like bare chested.
Huh.
And yep.
Is the club unisex, or is
No, it's
that
more like
not
you
how it
see
happens?
Mike's like who he's sleeping around with and stuff like
Oh,
that.
okay. Okay.
Um, and then in this one, it's almost all exclusively just like you're gonna see a bunch of men stripping and doing very sexy dances. Like the whole last 30 minutes of this movie is the show that they put on at the end of it. So like they go
Very
all
crowd pleasing. Kind of like the end of Elvis, except it's only about 10 minutes, I guess. Yeah. The 69
yeah,
concert.
which what a wonderful segue, Jim. So which Magic Mike is coming out this weekend, and so is a remastered version of Titanic. So I don't like Magic Mike's Last Dance was supposed to be an HBO Max original, and then Discovery came in and is like, we're not putting movies on HBO Max, and then shoved all of them into theaters. Um, so like, there's that House Party, Evil Dead Rise. If Lethal Weapon 5 is still going to happen, all of them were like, no, they're getting put into theaters.
Wait, what? Lethal Weapon 5? I didn't know that was even talked about by anyone.
Mm-hmm. Donner was going to direct it again,
That would have been the best way to do it.
but then he passed away. So apparently Mel Gibson was lined up to direct.
Oh,
So,
Jesus.
so
Might still be good, but it's also going to be cringe. We can talk about that at the movie club next month.
yeah, that's a whole other story. We should do Lethal Weapon on the movie club. I'd be so down.
We should. We could change it. We could change it up still. I think everybody would be down to change it up before the next meeting.
Oh well, we're gonna so shamelessly plugging the movie club on the Development Hell podcast. We're doing our special Oscar episode this year, and it's Braveheart, the best historical fiction you'll ever see. Because can't say that it's based off of actual history.
No, you can't.
No,
But
you
it
can't.
is a very rousing movie experience.
Yep. But speaking of obscenely long movies, we got Elvis. This is like I was so happy doing Carpenter next because I'm like, oh, I could do some 90-minute movies. It's like, and then it's just like, bam, this biopic of Elvis from 1979, starring Kurt Russell, who up to that point was mostly a kid star with Disney.
Mm.
And he was also one of the voices in Fox and the Hound.
Was he?
Mm-hmm.
Who did he voice in Fox and the Hound?
I can't remember if he voiced. It's either the Fox or the
One of
Hound.
the main characters.
Yeah,
It's got to be the Fox then, right? It should be. It's got to be. That's nuts.
yeah,
I had no idea. No
yeah.
idea. Fun
But here,
fact,
mhm.
my last name is shared by the guy who did the Sheriff of Nottingham's voice, and who was the other one? Napoleon in the
Animal.
Aristocats.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah. I
very
think he did
interesting.
one in. He might have done one in like Jungle Book or something like that too. But Pat
I'm
Buttram,
pretty sure,
yeah.
like that whole era of Disney with like, there's so much just ripped off from I think Jungle Book in Robin Hood. Like, there's recycled shots all through the whole entire thing. But
Right. They
that's
were like,
a
let's not do more choreography. Let's just take that one and put it in here.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure like Little John and Baloo are literally just the same drawing, except like changed up a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, they do the same dance. But Kurt Russell coming in here, Carpenter directing a biopic about Elvis, which I think is very interesting. That was a interesting choice because if you think about context, he really only had Assault on Precinct 13 and Halloween under his belt here. Because next week I'm going to be doing The Fog, and then that just starts a string of like Carpenter hits there. But Jim, what were some of your general thoughts on Elvis?
Yeah, I if you just showed me this movie and asked me like, who do you think directed it and given me a list of names, I don't think I would have been able to do it. Um, I don't really see now, to be fair, I haven't seen a lot of Carpenter. Carpenter's one of the directors that I have seen a lot of. I didn't grow up watching a lot of Carpenter movies, but this one, yeah, there wasn't. It feels kind of generic in a way.
Mhm.
So, I don't know. I'm curious to hear how you think this fits into his kind of um, career arc, if you will. But as you just said, he kind of was still finding his feet. So maybe he just had to pay some bills and needed a movie to produce,
Mhm.
to make rather a movie to make, and this came along. Overall thoughts, I thought it was very kind to Elvis. This is kind of a reverential movie. I felt
Mhm.
like it avoided. I did a little bit of research. So he did divorce Priscilla after 69. I don't remember. He divorced her at some point. They alluded to it in the movie and they didn't really address it.
Yep.
He was just kind of a sweetheart through the whole thing. He was kind of a hound dog. I feel like that's why they didn't include the song Hound Dog in the film, because he just kind of embodied, you know, kind of a down on his luck, mama's boy
Yeah.
puppy, I guess.
Oh, they sure played up the
So,
mama's boy part.
oh, they did so much, so much. I did things I didn't know before I watched this movie. I didn't know he was a mama's boy. I don't know if that's true or not. I didn't know that. Did he wear eye makeup into concerts, or is that just for this film?
I think it's just for the film. I think that was like
Okay.
them trying to make Kurt Russell look Elvis-y.
And then did he write Sweet Caroline or that Righteous Brothers song, or is he singing somebody else's song in the
Well, because I'm pretty
film?
sure Elvis. Well, that was the
Because
thing
I
because
if that an Elvis tune, if that is his.
yeah, because from what I understand, like he wasn't like a big songwriter. Like he performed a lot of music. I feel like that was and like this film I think gave him a lot of credit for like writing stuff and I'm like is that right? And
He
because
just
like
started singing things, and we assume that it comes from the heart, I guess.
because I know like in Elvis the new film basically it takes until he gets to like Vegas for you to really see like he's one making music and that was like Burning Love and Suspicious Minds and stuff like that
Mm-hmm.
like that era Elvis which they didn't hit on a whole lot in this movie to be honest like they didn't really hit on like that Vegas strip kind of stuff as much as I expected because like that's a huge part and it's very interesting watching this having watched the other Elvis movie this past year because like one obviously the other one's very much a Baz Luhrmann film like a lot I could only catch a couple of shots in this one that felt like John Carpenter
Hmm.
like the part where
Now,
he faints that POV shot that feels like Carpenter.
uh, okay. I
Yeah.
have not seen the new Elvis movie, the Baz Luhrmann, probably because it was directed by Baz Luhrmann.
Yep.
Um, yeah, and I don't think I will see that movie. Um, but it's weird that like 65 to 75 is probably my favorite decade or era of music.
Mm-hmm.
Popular, whatever, modern music. In the past 100 years, that's my favorite decade, right? Um, but Elvis to me is more. He's kind of intangible. He's so legendary at this point that I was never really interested in listening to Elvis's music. Not in the same way that I got into Zeppelin or into even like John Lee Hooker or a couple of blues men.
Boom, boom, boom.
Elvis to me never really. and I don't know if it was the country thing and the gospel thing, but um, I found this movie interesting because I was kind of learning new things about a person who then became Elvis. This is like a halfway step for me between the legend
Mhm.
and the real person. It's a glorified version of Elvis Presley, who is humanized in a way by this film and not quite elevated to, the Stars and Stripes Elvis that is strutting down the Vegas Strip that
Mhm.
everybody tries to impersonate. You know what I mean?
A hunk of burn of love. It's like the kind of
Right.
thing where it's like I'm a fan of his music. I enjoy. There's a few songs that I really really enjoy. Like my favorite song, is "Suspicious Minds," of his.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't
Mm-hmm.
know. I enjoy that era Elvis with like "Burnin' Love" and you have like I enjoy "Little Less Conversation," both the original version and then like the Junkie XL, like one that they made for like Ocean's 11 or whatever. Like that era. Um, Devil in Disguise, big fan of
Mm.
that. And
Okay.
like I'm not really a huge fan of like early Elvis with like the rockabilly kind of stuff. I'm just like, I could do without that.
Okay.
But
That's kind of the stuff that I relate to. The blue suede shoes, the bop bop baloo bop bop bam boom, whatever that song's called. That's the Elvis that I know best, I think.
and it's interesting
I thought it
because
was
like,
I thought it was charming that they tried to make him not sexy, especially coming off of that Magic Mike movie.
well, with like this, it's Kurt Russell, which it's because I guess in context that he was a kid star turned like adult star. So like
Mm.
I wonder what that is just like. Kurt Russell is just ridiculously charismatic and like everything. So I think he does a really good job here. I do wish that well, if you're gonna make biopics about performers that do music, like and sing specifically, get somebody who sings. It's like it stuck out like a sore thumb in this movie every time like the singing would happen because it's very obviously not him.
Agree. And I was surprised to find that it wasn't Elvis either. The singer for this movie was some other guy, Ronnie. I don't remember his name, but it wasn't Kurt Russell and it wasn't Elvis Presley. But it sounds a lot like Elvis. So
Yeah.
points to them for getting that much right. But the dubbing was not great. I agree
And
with you there.
this movie just reeked of made for TV movie. Like there's moments where it's just like the music swelling into like a cut to commercial, like you could tell it's just like ugh. It's
Is
silly.
that why the movie was so long? Because they had to fill a slot for TV?
I don't know. Like, and that's the thing. This movie is 2 hours and 40 minutes, yet they still completely skate over a lot of stuff. Like I feel like it's very interesting. Like the Colonel in this is like a fleeting presence.
And he's a very lovable guy. Like everything he does in this movie is for Elvis' benefit, right?
And apparently that's not the truth.
No,
Because
I don't think so. I think the reality is more like
Tom Hanks's Colonel Parker.
maybe. See, I haven't seen the movie. I was thinking of that movie about NWA. What was that? Straight Outta Compton? Is that what that
Mhm.
movie was called?
Yeah.
And who played their manager in that movie? It was
Well, well,
he,
might be getting it mixed up with different movies, but was it Paul Giamatti?
yeah, it was. It was Paul Giamatti. I was going to say he's done some really good work. He's John Adams, and then he's also Einstein on those shitty
Oh,
commercials that we see.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
and like
Paul Giamatti. He was. Yeah, exactly. I think it was. I think it was a little more,
yeah, he was Jerry Heller in that, their manager. And like, this movie really skated over that whole relationship with the Colonel and Elvis. And it's so interesting seeing Pat Hingle, who's like He's Commissioner Gordon in the Tim Burton Batman era movies. He's the one who plays the Colonel in this. And
Oh, is he? Oh man, I did not catch that at all.
mhm,
Also, Churchill. What's his name? Um, from the from the Nolan Bat. Did I lose you?
no, I'm trying to. You said Nolan?
Yeah, yeah. So the Commissioner Gordon from the Nolan Batmans is Darkest Hour. It's the
Gary
actor for
Oldman?
Darkest Hour, Gary Oldman. He is Jim Gordon to me.
Yep.
I wouldn't have even picked him out of a lineup for
There you
Gordon
go.
for any
It's
Batman movies.
yeah, it's this movie feels like very by the numbers kind of biopic. It feels like what Walk Hard is making fun of. And like it doesn't have the
It's fair.
quality either of like a Ray or a Walk the Line. It's just John Carpenter being very workmanlike putting this movie together. And
Mm.
like I feel like they just skate over so many things. Of course they're going to spend so much time with the mom since they got like Shelley Winters to play her. And I'm sure she was probably the biggest draw in this movie at the time. So I thought that was an interesting touch to it.
Really? Wow.
But
Hmm.
in general,
Yeah,
like
it definitely seemed like a TV movie to me as well. Yeah, for sure. Um, but to be a TV movie, it's not going to have the budget of a Walk the Line or a Ray
yeah.
or a modern Elvis, right? So I don't know. It's sometimes you just have to put in the work, right? And I don't. I'm not a drama between Carpenter and the studio, or Carpenter and the network, or Carpenter and the editors.
Mm,
Kind of seems like there was an agreed upon. It was going to, philosophy for this movie. Um,
mm.
I thought Kurt Russell was good though. To echo your sentiment, I thought he was good too. Just the dubbing, the editing, the dubbing was a little bit off, but I mean, it's like to my ears, to my eyes, it's stereotypical at this point. The Elvis impersonator, the drawl and the swagger and the hip movement. But I think he did as well as anyone could have with Elvis's character.
And I do think in hindsight, it's such an interesting thought to like Kurt Russell as Elvis. Because like I would never think to like cast Kurt Russell as Elvis. And it's Kurt Russell. So he does this thing, he's charismatic. And, you know, this film is very long. I don't think I would ever watch it again. I don't know if I would sit through this again. But it's definitely going to be down from what I've seen so far for myself. Personally, this is definitely going to be low on my Carpenter list. I haven't seen anything from the mid to late 90s and to now yet. So, from what I understand, it is a bad era.
So it's not necessarily the bottom of the barrel, is what you're saying.
Yeah, it's fine. It's does its job, it does it well. And in the end, I like because I know I had to like seek this out and try to find it. And it's not easily accessible either. So like there's a lot of things like piling up on like, yeah, I probably wouldn't watch this again. And unless you're like a diehard Elvis fan, there's so many other biopics and stuff that you could listen to and watch. And you know, this one does fine. And Carpenter moves on and starts making movies that are like his kind of movies. But any last thoughts, Jim, on Elvis?
Um, sure, yeah. I kind of, to be generous to the movie, I kind of had like I kind of get it. Like it's an ironic, his need to be, his vanity is there from the beginning, right? Like he
Hmm.
wants to read about himself in the school yearbook, and he's always worried about what he looks like, how he's dressed, combing his hair. Like it's all there from the beginning, the vanity stuff. So like maybe that was Carpenter's way of sneaking a little bit of I don't know, like a wrinkle into the whole thing.
Hmm.
Because it's his vanity and his need to be accepted that ultimately causes the divorce and the unhappiness at the end. Like in that scene that he's talking to his shadow on the wall, for example.
Yeah.
Um, I guess he's talking to his brother, but it's just his shadow on the wall, right? His twin brother. That was kind of cool. I didn't know he had a twin brother. That was one of the things I did not know about Elvis. Didn't know he was a twin. Um, but yeah, I kind of felt like that need to be accepted, that insecurity, that vanity was what brought him to stardom and what also caused him to be unsatisfied with stardom and drove him to drugs and alcohol and whatever else. Brought XXL Fat Elvis onto the stage
Yeah.
in whatever year that was, so yeah, I don't know if that was Carpenter kind of putting a fingerprint on it or if that was written in from the beginning. I didn't do enough research on this movie to really know.
Yeah, like all I know is it was such a interesting way of like taking in this movie only like within it's been less than a year since I've seen the other one, and it just kind of feels like it obviously didn't have the budget, it didn't have the style of direction and all of that. And it's the kind of thing where it's just like you get what you get out of it. So, and I feel like if you like Elvis, you'll enjoy it. If you like Kurt Russell, I think you'll enjoy seeing him on screen. Just be prepared to invest like almost 3 hours because it's locking in
Maybe
on
break it
it.
up. Maybe break it up like into 2 or 3 parts or something.
And like what this movie and the other Elvis movie told me is like this just needs to be like a mini series. Like there's
Mm.
just too much stuff in Elvis's life that's of significance to like, which I do think the newer film I think did better of capturing the overall scope of Elvis throughout his life. This
Mm.
one, there's a lot of just like peeking in at certain things in his life. And I was just a little surprised that we got so much of like early Elvis. And also, side note, the music felt so much like a 70s like a made for TV movie. And I'm just like, ugh. And it's frustrating because like I'm watching a Carpenter film. Where's the ding 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 ding? Like there's none of his personality in this, and
Okay.
that's a shame. But we might not recommend Elvis per se. But we do have some recommendations for people. So Jim, what would you like to recommend to everybody?
Yeah, so Sundance just happened recently out here in Salt Lake City and Park City, Utah. One movie that slipped by me was called Little Richard. Sorry, I Am Everything, not This Is Everything. Little Richard, I Am Everything. And allegedly, it's about the queer-ish beginnings of rock and roll, um, going from Little Richard through Keith Richards and Robert Plant to whatever Prince. I don't know. There's a traceable line there
Mhm.
of kind of non-binary identification and rock and roll. It was high on my list and I didn't get to see it. So I will be watching it as soon as possible. I don't know if that breaks the rules of the suggestion, but I haven't seen it yet.
Hey, I've never once really thought about it and didn't tell people they had to actually watch the thing to recommend it to people. So there you go. I do have a couple of recommendations for everybody. So I always like to do one new film that I watched, a rewatch of one of my movies, and then something off my watch list. So a new release film, Godland, that came out last weekend, is a drama about a Danish priest in the 19th century who's sent to the southern parts of Iceland and kind of is on this mission and winds up in this small town, and things get a little interesting in how he clashes with some of the members of this small town. So it's a very interesting film. It's from director Liner Palmason, and they previously did a film called A White White Day that I really loved. I wound up getting that in a that was one of the first movies that I watched in the early days of COVID with the remote cinemas that like independent theaters were doing. So the virtual cinema, that was pretty cool. It also stars Ingvar Sigurdsson, who was the lead in that film. Apparently they do a lot of work together, and I really liked him in this too. So
Okay.
it's 2 hours and
Very
23
cool.
minutes, but it's like visually arresting and just such a beautiful looking film. In honor of Knock at the Cabin coming out, I did rewatch Signs, and I am a huge fan of the movie Signs. I watched it for the first time when I was 11, and it scared the shit out of me. Like bad. And still watching this, it still scares me. There's a impressive amount of detail in the screenplay that you might not notice, but I've watched this movie so many times. There's just certain things like you pick up each time, and I do really like the cast, and like Mel Gibson's very interesting in this film for like this period of like Mel Gibson in like the early 2000s, and then Joaquin Phoenix, who was still like rising up at that point. He had Gladiator under his belt, and then he had this, and like a Rory Culkin and Abigail Breslin rounding out the cast as the kids. It's 100% a Shyamalan film. It feels like a Shyamalan film, but there's something deep and resonant about the messaging in it. And I'm not really a religious person, but like this movie really made me feel like you could feel that connection. And I appreciate the struggle that they focus on for Mel Gibson's character. Was a priest, wife passes away, he loses his faith, and trying to find it again. So, and I'm
Do you
definitely
know if Mel Gibson did he ask for the wife to be removed from the script? Because I think that's like a prerequisite of any Mel Gibson film, isn't it? He's got to have lost his wife, right?
I feel like this is such a big part of the story. I assume that it was part of the story from the start, kind of thing. But that's an
Okay.
interesting thought. And then this is the weirdest one that I'm going to recommend: A Town Called Panic. This is a French stop motion animated film about a cowboy and an Indian only wish to come up with a brilliant idea for Mr. Horse's birthday. It's this weird, quirky small town, and it focuses on a horse, Indian, and a cowboy who live together. And just the complete insanity that happens in this film. Like looking at the poster, it just looks like some kind of spoof that Trey Parker and Matt Stone made, to be honest. Like it's so ridiculous.
Okay.
And I got to
Where
watch
did you
that
see
on
this movie?
I watched it on Canopy, which I have access to. Canopy
Nice.
streaming service.
Okay.
It's like an hour and 15 minutes as a stop motion, very, very French film, like very French sensibilities and everything. But those are my recommendations. And that's a wrap here on Welcome to the Wasteland. Next week, we're going to be having Vinny come on, and he's going to be talking The Fog with me. And then it goes on a roll from there because we're getting The Fog and The Thing and Starman and Christine and Escape from New York in there, and They Live in there. So it's going to be an exciting like month and a
Nice.
half of like peak Carpenter right there. But Jim, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Shane. Thanks for making me watch this movie. I don't think I ever would have seen it otherwise.
I would never have watched this if it wasn't for my Carpenter deep dive, and that's a cool thing about this.
It's a
So
cool thing.
I really enjoy taking like these deep dives on directors and really, seeing an artist's path along the way. But thank all of you out there for always tuning in and supporting your Wasteland Reviewer.